starting off with that very sad event we're still seeing play out in Plateau State because issues like this really linger. They never go away. The state has ordered 3 days of mourning. You can only imagine what the families are going through as a result of that building collapse. A school building collapsed, killing at least 22 people. There's a tendency to think, oh, that happened in Plateau State. I'm here in, Kano, or I'm here in Port Harcourt, or in Ibadan, or Lagos. I'm safe, but you shouldn't think that way. So this morning, we're turning attention to that, what to look out for. What are those issues, particularly during this season where the rains come down? They weaken the structure. How should people be proactive, and who should be taking responsibility? We're joined on the program this morning by the past president, Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers, past president, Building Collapse Prevention Guild, Engineer Eddie Atemoyogo. He's right here with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, engineer. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers. Yeah.
It's good to have you, but that event we saw, terrible. And I imagine if we had that power of turning back the hand of time, we'll all just do it, just to ensure that those children and teachers are safe. So let me start with a comment that we got this morning, and I think it's important to start from that end. And this is what the user says on X: as the engineer and the landlord should be arrested. This is at the point of grief where people want some sort of, consequence, some sort of punishment. So who should be taking responsibility? Let's start there. Then we'll sort of walk back to those areas. So who are those who are meant to be responsible for issues like this? Okay,
thank you very much. First of all, our hearts and our prayers are with the families that lost their loved ones, the young children. Before Plateau State, there was a Lagos State where 42 children died in their school. So this thing has been happening for some time. And there are people that are responsible in any building procurement process. The most important person is the client, the owner of the building, because he hires every other professional that will work on the building. The building industry has become an all-commerce affair, and it shouldn't be so. Because building designs and all that, there's a lot of mathematics, there's a lot of physics, and these are subjects that people used to run away from when they were in secondary school. So those that have been trained to handle these issues should be allowed to take responsibility. But it's an all-commerce affair. Like I said, the landlord, the owners of the property, the most important person because he hires everybody. Yeah. Then the professionals that design the building, they're also liable. Those that constructed, they're also liable. And then those who are supposed to regulate, to inspect and make sure that people do what is supposed to be done, they're also liable. So there are a whole lot of people. When the building collapses, a lot of people, are involved, and each will have their own responsibility.
So regulators in terms of government?
Yes.
That's the state's ministry, or at least the organ of the state.
There's a planning authority that will just vet the plans and approve. Then there's a building control. They're supposed to be visiting the site and making sure that people do the right thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of, Well, the problem in Nigeria is that each time there is a collapse, they bring out more regulations. So they keep empowering the same people that have the wrong attitude. There's no way you can empower a lizard to become a crocodile. It's impossible. So it needs, a mind shift, a change of attitude, and a new way of doing things.
So owner of the building, the landlord, the professionals, and I imagine the engineers, the architects who probably designed that, or the structural or the civil engineer. You can help us. The structural engineer that did that.
Yeah, but most of the times, they don't even hire the right professionals.
In the first place.
In the first place.
There you go. You talked about the construction workers and the regulator. So it's a whole gamut. And yes, the state has shut down the school. I mean, what else would have happened anyway? But it's important that we mention these names so we know what to do with them. But there are a lot of people that said they had seen this building and it was a no-brainer. Said seeing this building the way it was going to collapse anyway. So one just wonders, first, you talked about the agencies not being empowered to doing the work the right way, so they dropped the ball in that sense. But what will make the owner of a building see that and allow it to go on? Some will say, is it the rains that caused this? or just someone came and said, it's okay to keep using this building? So what are the things you found out in terms of reality now that is usually responsible for this?
Yeah, so most buildings will give you signs before they collapse, if they're properly designed. The only time you have sudden collapse if there are some dynamic loads like earthquake. Buildings are not designed for earthquake, and they're subjected to earthquake, or some dynamic load like the 9/11 where a plane came and nobody anticipated that. But a properly designed building, will give you signs. You see some cracks on the wall. You see that windows are no longer closing very well. You see that doors are not, and at times you hear some sound. So buildings usually give, signs that they are in distress. But if you don't take any action, then it will progressively lead to a collapse. But if you call the right professionals and they do their study, they can recommend ways you can actually strengthen the building and to stay. But some landlords, they will see these things, but because of greed, and they don't want to spend money on their building, and then because they are not compelled, because most of the times you need a compelling force. Things don't get done except compelled by the force of the law or just by the fear of God. These are two things that can compel people to do the right thing. The force of the law or the fear of God. And so when people are left with only the fear of God and they do not fear God, they allow these things to deteriorate until it leads to collapse. So government regulation is very, very important. Enforcing the regulations, because there are a lot of regulations out there, but we have compromised system. The whole system is compromised. So people see these things and they close their eyes and it leads to such collapse.
Yeah, so I wonder, how wide that, compromise will get to, because as rightly observed, people had seen that building and they knew that it was structurally defective. And there are parents in this mix as well. Imagine having a student in that school and, there are signs of, structural weakness, and yet the students, the parents continue to allow the students to go to that school, to attend that school. So I wonder, if parents are complicit here as well, and is this a poverty factor? Before we continue to dive into the professional lapses.
Yeah, the issue is that it takes a trained eye to spot some of these signs. So the parents might not see them. They might not be very obvious. So it takes a trained eye to spot some of these distresses and all that. So we have recommended several times our institution about the issue of structural surveys, that buildings should be subjected to structural surveys after every 5 years, especially the public buildings. Every 5 years, you should hire structural engineers to go and do structural survey on buildings so they can detect if there are some distresses and recommend remedial measures. So if we adopt, this is the global practice. So if we can adopt some of these measures, some of these buildings, may be saved. And if they need to go, then they have to go before they kill other people. So
let's look at professional lapses now. There surely must be Ministry of Lands, and survey in every state of the Federation. Maybe not all of them have building control agencies as we do here in Lagos. So there are different capacities of responsibilities. Is it as expansive as it should be, with the deployment of professionals to all aspects of building monitoring for quality assurance? Or is it a challenge of inadequate personnel, to cover all the areas required to ensure that there are as minimal collapses of buildings as possible?
Yeah, it's always good to get things right the first time, instead of waiting for people that will go and monitor and find problems. So the starting point is getting the right professionals to handle the procurement process. Because before any building can be designed, there has to be a soil investigation. You have to know the type of soil. Not just the soil on the surface, because you have layers of soil. You might have a good soil on the surface and beneath it's a bad soil. So when you hire a structural engineer, they will engage geotechnical engineers who will do a soil test to know the type of soil. So you know the kind of building that the soil can carry and the kind of foundation that can enable the building to stand. So it's important to get it right the first time. Then when it has the stresses, that's when all these people that move around, look for...
That's the level of the, owner of the building or the developer, and that's their responsibility. I'm talking about the state level now for monitoring.
Yeah.
What do you find, as a guild, what do you find to be the case in states of the Federation, in ministries particularly that are charged with the responsibility of ensuring quality assurance? What are the challenges that they have?
The challenges are they are understaffed. Because the amount of buildings that are going on, there's just no way their staff can, meet up, going to all the building sites and seeing what is going on. And so I've suggested to the Lagos State government, it's an ongoing discussion, to engage professionals in the markets. Because there are professionals all over the whole place. Every state of the Federation, there are professionals. So I've encouraged them to engage professionals. It's an ongoing discussion. When the last commissioner was there, he moved the hand of the clock a bit. He engaged some professionals to come and design what they call certified appraisers. These are people that will now go to construction sites and make sure they have a technical audit to make sure you have the right professionals there, to make sure that you're using the right materials, to make sure you're sticking to the designs that have been approved. But when he left, I think those professionals were, shoved aside and the civil servants have taken over. Now they're advertising and all that. I don't know the kind of response they're getting. So the regulators are understaffed. They need to make use of professionals who are in practice so that they can help them to make sure that things are done properly.
Well, the principal of the school had said that, he inspects the school compound daily and didn't see signs of, it having issues or about to collapse. Even though the governor had said this wouldn't have happened if the people who built the school, I think that talks about the owners and the professionals or whoever is responsible for building that had adhered strictly to the law. So the school has been shut, as I said. Even the federal government has ordered an investigation into this. And I understand they're also trying to see if other schools in the area, in the state, have the same issues. But I'd like us to now speak generally about this. We'll keep our eyes on that investigation and see what comes out of it, particularly who's meant to take responsibility. But I had a conversation with someone last week, and this is for Lagos, and you said that this is now an all-comers affair, and that's why I'm going to this. And the person said, well, the house just next to her, the developers bought the place over and they pulled down the previous structure. And what they do is they just, I don't know how to say, they just put something on the debris and start building on it. And she said that she's even had issues with her own building as a result of that. And this conversation went on and on. I said that she's seen signs of the other building close to her even tilting. And this is in Lagos that she mentioned, and you could say a visibly worried person talking about this. So when you say it's an all-comers affair, how do we ensure that, yes, it's a business that you want people to invest in, but it's also a business that is very regulated? We know it's a very liquid business. A lot of money is pumped into it. So who should be putting their foot down and saying, no, this is what should be happening in this sector?
Yeah, we have the professional bodies, you have regulators of the professional bodies. And then also at the state level, you have building control. It will shock you that there is no register at the Council of Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria for structural engineers. What we have is just civil engineers. Because the way that current registers, the register you based on the department you graduated from. But disciplines like structural engineering, they are specialists in nature. So you become a structural engineer either through training, higher training, or through experience when you work under structural engineers. So there's no register in current where you see this is a register of structural engineers in Nigeria. So that provides a cover for all engineers, all civil engineers, whether you're on highway, whether you're in water. So long as you have a current seal that has civil engineer, you can seal any drawing.
Oh, I see.
So it's been an ongoing problem. We've been, telling current you need to create a register for structural engineers, and you need to adopt the practice that what happens in the UK. You have engineering council. Engineering council empowers all other institutions to actually regulate their own aspect of engineering practice. So you need to get that right so that people know that for you to design a building, you need a structural engineer because he's been trained to assess loads and to transfer them safely to the foundation.
Not a civil engineer.
Yeah, there are some civil engineers who also are trained structural engineers. But the problem is that you cannot distinguish who is a trained structural engineer among the civil engineers. But if it's structural engineers, they are trained to handle these aspects.
So that's an important question. So what is the association doing now to ensure that there's a database of structural engineers who are practitioners in the field, such that the association does not take responsibility for any major disaster that happens, and they can identify who it is that has done that, and you probably blacklist them?
Yes. The Institution of Structural Engineers has a database of all structural engineers in Nigeria. Because before you can become registered, you go through a certification. We're the only institution of engineering in Nigeria that has what we call 7-hour open book exam. It's a certifying exam. It does not test just knowledge, it tests your experience. So you can bring any textbook you like. If you don't have the experience, you will fail the exam. And the failure rate is very high. But the pass rate is about between 25 and 30%. So when you go through that exam and you pass, then you can be certified as a structural engineer. But that's where it stops. Our institution does not have any force of the law. The only regulator that has a force of the law is current.
That's the council.
It's a council. But council has refused to recognize even the exam and use it as a criteria for registering structural engineers in Nigeria.
Why, might I ask?
They don't have any register for structural engineers. They just register you based on the department from where you graduated. After 5 years, if you can pass their general exam, they register you. So it provides a cover for people who are not really structural engineers, who don't even have experience, but they are civil engineers. They can practice. But they're not the main problem. There are also quacks, people that are not even engineers, who have been building for quite some time. They just have their way, one go their way, get drawings approved, and start constructing. And at the end of the day, we just have collapse.
So what would it require for the Institute of Structural Engineers itself, to acquire that regulatory authority, for you to be able to, do something to prevent the practice of quacks in the profession? Yeah,
we'll have to get, there has to be an act of parliament, and it's a whole lot of course, current will fight you. Some other people will fight because already current has all the powers. All they need to do is just empower the institutions, and they can do that. So it's a long, route to getting the parliament to, give its own act and give you a force of the law so they can begin to regulate.
This is a very big issue. COREN, by the way, in case you're wondering, is the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. It's an act of law, as you said, that put COREN in place, so it has the backing of the law. But if we're going through this challenge now, then something needs to give. Because there are houses right now that beautiful houses, people are living in or about to buy, and you can't tell if it was a structural engineer that approved that plan or just a general engineer or an engineer who is not really versed in structural engineering, as you said, and that is very important. So one just wonders the magnitude of this. How many buildings out there were not really certified by the person, the structural engineer, someone who has the experience, and that is mind-boggling, really, because you can only imagine what will happen to those buildings. So if this is a pervasive issue now, and I'm glad you're talking about this, and this is something that should be resolved as soon as possible, I want you to now walk us through what to look out for, because getting a house is very important. Sometimes you don't have a choice. If you're renting an apartment, you can't begin to ask, was this approved by a structural engineer or just a random engineer? You just want to get an apartment that is cheap and you something to just protect yourself. So what can I do? And I'm asking for a lot of Nigerians. What can they do as a tenant right now? The problem is staying in the house for 2 years anyway. How can they ensure that they're at least safe to a large extent? That's on the one hand. On the other hand is the conversation I had last week with the person said she had reported to the local government, or at least one of the authorities around, and after maybe once or twice they came, but they said, well, my hands are tied, I can't come again, because it looks like they've been pressured by the developers. And that talks about the power that developers have yet again. So it's a double-edged question for people who seem helpless? What can they do? And then what do you do even when you've done something and it looks like you're not getting the appropriate result?
Yeah, so with the spread of collapse, people should be aware there are structural engineers who are responsible for designing the structural frame of every building. So even if as a tenant you want to hire a property, ask for the drawings. Can I see your structural drawings?
Engineer, let's step
Can
up
I see? Yeah, can I see? Yeah, it's important.
You can ask.
Yeah, you can ask.
And you should get.
Because some buildings don't even have approved plans. Some don't have approved plans. And then also ask, do you have soil tests? Or you can,
for a tenant.
Or you can consult a structural engineer. Please, I want to rent this apartment. Can you just, go there and have like an audit?
You pay more.
So you pay more for a lawyer to help you ask all of these questions, and you pay more for an engineer to help you ask this question.
How much cost can you attach to life? Because that's the problem. Most people don't pay attention to pre-construction activities before a building is constructed. There are a lot of activities that go on before you see people constructing. And that's why they say, oh, engineers wear suits and stay in the office. In that office, they assess the load. In that office, they look at the soil. They even model the soil, how it's supposed to be, put the load, all the load that's required, and design the structures before you can see people building on site. And while people are building on site, they are supposed to be going there and make sure that what they have designed is what is being constructed. So if you don't follow any of this process, there might be a problem.
So let's look at this stats that your association provided on the number of building collapses, and it's quite telling if you consider the list. Lagos, of course, shares the highest burden with 348 building collapse cases since 1974. Anambra follows there curiously with 26. Abuja has 26. As well. I wonder the variation in that mix. Oyo comes next with 21, and Kano has 19. Of course, for Lagos, it's a no-brainer because of the congestion and the thousands of structures that are ongoing every other day. And you have talked about the limited personnel available for monitoring of these construction sites. But just talk to us in terms of topography, what seems to be responsible for the high cases that we have also in states like Anambra, Oyo, and of course the FCT as well.
Okay, if you look at the centers that have the high incidence of building collapse, they are city centers. So there's a lot of construction going on in that place. About 10% of Nigerians live in Lagos, so that's why you have that kind of scale. But when you look at Anambra states, Onitsha and all that, they are highly populated cities. And the kind of construction that is going on there is not really properly regulated. People don't respect professionalism. That is the issue. They just believe that people have been building over the ages, so they'll prefer somebody who has done it before to come and build for them without doing the mathematics and the physics that's involved. So if you look at those areas with high incidence of building collapse, they are city centers where there's a lot of construction going on. So the same thing that's happening in Lagos, but on a smaller scale. So that's why also the incidence in those areas are slightly lower than that of Lagos.
The other part of my question, and it's good you're giving context, is about whistleblowing.
Yeah.
First, there's this concern for, safety, security. A lot of people don't want to whistleblow because they're not sure that if I go to report, I would not be targeted. But I think a lot of people are beginning to, get off that because this is life we're talking about. Yeah. You have to actually do something. But a lot of people whistleblow, they report, and they don't get the appropriate response that they want to get. And as you said, a lot of people now personally hire engineers and say, well, I'll take this upon myself. And sometimes they even give results and they still don't get anything. So when you whistleblow and that whistle is not loud as it ought to, is not getting the right response, what do you do? What does for example, the building collapse organization, is that something you can take on board as well? Because that's a major one. And what happens when we have the rains? Does that also affect the integrity, the structural integrity of buildings? Yeah,
the issue of whistleblowing, like the Building Collapse Prevention Guild, is an advocacy group. What we can do is just blow the whistle.
As well?
Yeah, the cock can only crow, but you can never, force a lazy man out of his bed. So we blow the whistle and we also sit on the government and just keep talking about it until they do something. And some of these regulators, they're also part of Building Collapse Prevention Game. So have a platform. And so when people blow the whistle, they also see it and they respond. But like I said, they're overwhelmed with the sheer number of things going on in the states, in Lagos State. Yeah. So some other states like Ogun State, they are collaborating with the Building Collapse Prevention Guild, and that's why you can see that you don't have so much collapse.
And is Lagos collaborating as well?
Lagos has been dragging their feet for years, so we don't know what is going on.
The rain spots. I was asking, what do the rains do to a building? Do they reduce the integrity? Because that's been a concern. People are wondering, when the rains come, does that affect my building? Yeah. The rains part has to do with the soil, the type of soil. There are some soils that become unstable when there is water. For example, clay will expand. Laterite will liquefy. All right? So that's why when you see waterlogged areas, when they're trying to sand fill before constructing, they make use of sharp sand, which remains stable. Whether, in the presence of water, it remains stable. And if you do a proper soil investigation, even in your design, you take into consideration that those soils have been saturated. But if you don't know the physics and the mathematics of it, and you just go ahead and build, and the clay expands, it can affect your foundation. Or the laterite liquefies, it can affect the foundation. So the issue is doing the proper thing. Get the right professionals to handle your building process. And what you pay to professionals, even all professionals, might not be more than 10% of the cost of building. But Nigerians want to invest so much money in the construction, but when it comes to the preparation, they believe that it's just paper you're producing and they want to pay peanuts, or they rush through the whole process and go into the main construction. So that's a big problem.
And it's an important question because, what comes through my mind is the floods of 2 years ago, 2022, where we saw practically houses in Kogi State submerged, and in some other states of the Federation as well, where there were serious flooding challenges. Delta State, Bayelsa State, even Anambra, that is also on your list. And it tickles the imagination really to wonder what is contained in your functions as a guild if you have cardinal objectives of, advising states of the Federation as a result of the impact of adverse weather conditions, that those structures may come in structurally defective in the long term rather than the short term.
Yeah, one thing is that the attitude of civil servants towards professionals in the market is even terrible. They see you as people that want to poke your nose into matters that don't concern you. They see you as competing with them. So even to cooperate with the guild is a problem. Of all the states in the Federation, it's only Ogun State that is cooperating with the guild. And that's because their current commissioner, is a founding member of the guild. So he knows the importance of some of the things we're talking about. So he made sure he facilitated it, talked to the governor, and the governor bought into it. And right now they're collaborating with us. So the attitude of the civil servants is also a problem. So all we can do is to flag and to insist. But they are the ones that have the force of the law to make sure that things are
What
done
about
properly.
engagements with leaders of the ministry, i.e. the appointed commissioners or the permanent secretaries of those ministries?
I have had several. When I was the president of the Building Collapse Prevention Guild, who had several meetings with the commissioner, who had several meetings. When Fashola was there, it was better. But since Fashola left and the civil servants are the ones in charge, it has been a problem.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
This user on X, John K. Architect, says most of these buildings are not handled by registered building professionals like architects and structural engineers. Says the government planning authority is highly compromised, allowing the developers with other intentions to have their way. So this is one of the users, and it just re-echoes the point you made. So quickly as we wind down, let's run through those signs to watch out for yet again. What should alarm you and get you to take action?
Okay. When you see cracks on your buildings, that's a sign.
There's
and there are different types of cracks.
Exactly.
When you see a horizontal crack it means that it's a foundation issue. The building is settling.
That's a
straight line.
Okay.
That goes this way?
This way. Okay. When you also see an inclined crack, it means there's some form of settlement going on.
What does settlement mean?
It means that the building is having issues, the foundation is giving way. Okay. All right? Yeah. So when you see a straight crack, it might just be, some construction errors and all that. But the one that should alarm you is a horizontal crack and an inclined crack. And there are also some subtle signs. For example, if your doors are no longer closing very well, which means it's no longer square, it's settling, and doors can no longer, so when you're opening it, you find some problems. The same thing with your windows. And at times you can hear some funny sound, all right? Maybe the roof is under stress, and the nails and the wood are making noise, all right? Second, and lastly, if you drop a tennis ball on the floor, and it begins to roll towards a corner, it's an idea that maybe the building is beginning to tilt. So these are some of the signs that, And then on the outside, at times you have fissures.
Around the house?
Around the house. That's a serious foundation.
Fissures
what
are
do
like
fissures
cracks
look
on
like?
the floor.
That's fissures means that you have a ground, cracks on the ground.
On the ground.
Yes.
Okay. Now, very quickly, it would be remiss of us to talk about the challenges of monitoring without also talking about what the law says, where ample notification has been given and the state government wants to move in to evacuate people and demolish, and the people will refuse to evacuate. So is there anything that the law says that compels people to leave a structurally defective building?
If a building is structurally defective, the government can seal the place and evacuate people. But, in this climb, we have governance without compassion. People's houses are being demolished and there's no alternative. You can provide an alternative.
There should be an alternative.
A temporary alternative. Right. Move them there, because governance is about people. But here we have government without soul, without compassion, and it's terrible. So that's why that's what forces people into disobedience. They just stay there because they don't have money to relocate themselves.
Right. But ultimately, your safety is important.
It's important, yeah.
Very, very important to reiterate that. But I would like to thank you so much for providing insights into this. I see some more questions coming in, but we have to run right now. We're speaking with Engineer Eddie Atomoyogo, past president, Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers, past president, Building Collapse Prevention Guild. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, if there's anything you take from this, ensure that the right people handle those constructions. It is just a no-brainer. We'll take a moment now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to electricity, power generation. Is it about to get better? Stay with us.